By the end of this video, you'll know if Space Marine 2 is truly worth playing. Let's dive right in and uncover the details. Right from the start, you're thrust into the thick of battle, which is exactly where a Space Marine belongs. The combat quickly ramps up, and every heavy footstep brings you closer to the chaotic spectacle of war. Hills in the distance are teeming with swarming Tyranids, while ruby flashes of last fire slice through the air as human allies desperately hold back the alien horde. It's an overwhelming sight, and it immediately sets the tone for what's to come. One of the first things that'll hit you is the sheer number of enemies the game throws at you. Space Marine 2 doesn't do small skirmishes. It's all-out war. With a few squeezes of the trigger on your bolt rifle and some powerful swings of your combat blade, you'll start thinning the ranks. The combat feels familiar if you've played the original game, but it's clear that it has evolved. The hacking, slashing, shooting, and executing is all here, but it's been taken up a notch with gory executions that refill your armor and kills that restore lost vitality. It's a chaotic dance of violence that keeps you on your toes. Combat has seen some significant improvements too. Now, you can parry most enemy strikes to create space or deal damage, and more intense attacks are marked by a blue circle, signaling that they're about to hit hard. The red circle indicates an unblockable attack that you'll need to dodge. Perfectly timing a parry or dodge can lead to a quick kill, stunning your enemy, or letting you deliver a devastating gun strike, where you pull out your bolt pistol and fire a critical hit at close range. These additions make the combat more engaging and satisfying, especially when dealing with the relentless waves of Tyranids. Speaking of waves, you're going to be fighting a lot of enemies. The Tyranids come at you in swarms, and melee-focused foes can quickly become overwhelming. But with the new combat features, you've got the tools to handle them. Locking on to larger enemies like Tyranid warriors helps you focus your attacks on the biggest threats, making it easier to take them down without getting bogged down by the smaller fry. These larger enemies are no pushovers either. They'll block your attacks and throw in their own unblockable combos, forcing you to think before you swing. Taking down one of these big threats can trigger a psychic synapse feedback, causing smaller enemies to recoil or even die, cutting them off from their hive mind. As you get into the groove of combat, you'll find that the weapons feel more defined. The combat knife, for instance, is now a viable alternative to the chainsword, offering faster strikes at the cost of raw power. The bolt rifle, auto bolt rifle, and bolt carbine give you options in ranged combat, whether you prefer precision or overwhelming firepower. And then there are the heavy weapons, like the heavy bolter and the melter gun, which can incinerate a whole corridor of Tyranids in a few shots. These weapons feel distinct, and swapping between them depending on the situation adds a layer of strategy to the game. One thing that stands out is how the game handles the scale of the battles. You'll often find yourself switching between weapons, not just to adapt to the environment, but because of the sheer intensity of the fights. The Tyranid swarms are relentless, and there are moments where it feels like you're genuinely being overwhelmed. One particularly memorable moment involves holding a piece of high ground outside a bunker with your Imperial Guard allies, only to see hundreds of Tyranids charging toward you. The screen is filled with so many enemies that it's hard to pick out individual targets, so you just fire into the horde and hope for the best. The scale of these battles does push the game's performance at times. There are moments where the frame rate struggles, particularly during these massive, intense skirmishes. But even with a few stutters, the spectacle of what's unfolding in front of you keeps the excitement high. So there's hope that some of these issues might be ironed out before the final release. The game doesn't let up in its intensity, and it constantly reminds you that you're a Space Marine, a near-invincible warrior. The human troops around you react to your presence with awe, and everything from the thunderous footsteps to the roar of your weapons feeds into the fantasy of being one of the Emperor's finest. Space Marine 2 does an excellent job of making you feel like a superhuman Astartes, towering over allies and enemies alike, charging into battle with your armor sparking and your weapons blazing. It's the little details, like the way your armor vents heat after a fight, that really sell the experience. Your allies in the game add to this sense of power. Space Marine 2 can be played in 3-player co-op, but if you're playing solo, the AI fills in for your squad mates. Surprisingly, they're pretty competent, rarely getting stuck in the environment and generally being effective in combat. They have their own abilities too, like scanning for enemies, and they can pick you up if you get downed in the heat of battle. It's a nice touch that adds to the overall feeling of being an unstoppable force. Visually, Space Marine 2 is a treat. The graphics are impressive, and the game does a great job of bringing the grimdark universe to life. There's nothing serene or calming about the world of Warhammer 40,000, but the game's environments, from swampy battlefields littered with corpses to oppressive, dimly lit corridors, are dripping with atmosphere. The characters, weapons, and armor are all finely detailed, and the game's overall fidelity makes it a joy to behold, even when the scenes are drenched in blood and gore. In conclusion, Space Marine 2 is shaping up to be a worthy successor to the original game. The combat is intense, the weapons feel powerful, and the game does an excellent job of making you feel like a true Space Marine. There are a few rough edges, particularly with performance during larger battles, but these are minor issues in the grand scheme of things. If you're a fan of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, or just enjoy action-packed games with a ton of depth, Space Marine 2 is definitely worth keeping an eye on. But as always, it's wise to approach with some caution, especially if you're sensitive to performance hiccups. The game delivers on the fantasy of being one of the Emperor's finest, and that alone makes it a thrilling experience worth diving into. Thanks for watching, and until next time, catch you in the next video.